Hi, and welcome to another live video today. Just wanted to say thanks for each and every one of those who joined in my Forgive to Freedom Challenge, which was during the period of the 7th of July to the 13th of July. Basically, with the Forgive to Freedom Challenge, it's working on forgiveness. And a big part of working on forgiveness, it allows us to let go of things that we hold on to that doesn't necessarily serve us purpose. So once you forgive, you sort of release the negative energy associated with whatever the traumatic event may have been in the past. There's different aspects to forgiveness in terms of we have to ask for forgiveness, we forgive someone, and then there's a phase of either receiving or I guess not receiving forgiveness. So during the challenge, I had the opportunity to sort of discuss that and talk about those different aspects. With the Forgiveness to Freedom Challenge, I covered it in 7 different phases. So basically, the first phase, it's called figuring it out. The second phase is releasing the effects. Third phase, energizing the space. Fourth phase, experiencing the new energy. Fifth phase, demonstrate forgiveness. Then observe the effects on the 6th, and then 7th, it's moving forward. So with the Forgive to Freedom Challenge, like I said, the big part of it is always to let go of things that not necessarily is serving you any purpose. So with that being said, the first day of phase 1, it's basically where you figure it out. What you do on that day is that you have the opportunity to do reflection. You figure out which event that you want to do. You figure out the what and the who of what is going on in terms of what do you want to work with forgiveness. The second day, you incorporate a little bit more. And the feedback that I've gotten is that from those who were able to participate in the challenge, they found that it was challenging on the second day, especially where it was tough because they had to go back into reflect into what was going on and what the actual event was, connecting back to their younger version of themselves. So be it a week ago, be it a month ago, be it 10, 20, 30 years ago, the second phase allows you to sort of go back and connect with that younger self. Once you release the effects, you want to start to energize that space because you now have an empty space that you need to fill. So on the third phase, basically, we focus on energizing the space. What that means is that with that empty space that we let go of things that we were holding on to, we want to fill it with something positive. So we took that opportunity on that day to build our affirmation in terms of what you would like as an individual to get into that space. So you release the negative energies of whatever happened during that event. And then you fill it with things like light, love, and some of the things that people included was called peace. So including peace into energizing that space where you let go of things and you forgive someone or you ask for forgiveness or you allow yourself to forgive yourself even then. You want to energize that space. And like I said, some people chose that in terms of the affirmation that I shared to include things like light and love and any other positive energy. So the main one that people shared during the challenge was that they felt like peace was something that they wanted to include in that. So that came up in terms of the third phase. The fourth phase, it's where you experience the new energy. So basically, it's a self-awareness day, a self-awareness phase where you sort of allow yourself to connect and do a lot of reflection, experience how you feel considering how you've been working on forgiving someone or even forgiving yourself. The fifth day became a demonstration of forgiveness. So like I mentioned earlier, there's different aspects of forgiveness. Forgiveness in terms of asking for forgiveness, forgiveness in terms of you being forgiven as an individual, and forgiveness in terms of you forgiving somebody. And then there's the aspect of whether you receive forgiveness or don't receive forgiveness. So just taking the opportunity to do in some reflection on how those things work for an individual, doing things like role reversal, having yourself picture what was it like when somebody forgave you, or what was it like when you asked for forgiveness, um, or if an event where something happened and you felt like you don't want to forgive somebody, doing reflection on those things sort of help to bring a little bit more awareness to what exactly is going on in that situation, ways that you could improve just your own personal approach to the idea of doing forgiveness. Day 6 was observe the effects. So again, another day of self-awareness, mindfulness, trying to connect to see how you felt in terms of everything that played a part in the general schemes of things. So from day 1 to day 6, everything is you build and build and build, and you practice the forgiveness, but you want to take an opportunity to observe what it felt like. So day 6 focused a lot on that. And then day 7 for the forgiveness challenge was pretty much moving forward. So yes, the whole concept of the Forgive to Freedom challenge was based off of doing an event to forgive one person or one event. But the idea beyond moving that, it's that you want to be able to make it something practical. You want it to be something that becomes sort of routine. So on that day, we talked about what are steps to move forward, what are steps to protect yourself. A lot of people that were in those live sessions, each one of the days, they had a big part of where things have happened to them. I think only one person shared that she was working on herself asking for forgiveness. Everyone else, I think, for the most part, were working on forgiving others. And when it comes to the forgiving others, it typically means that there's some type of traumatic event that happened. And in order to protect yourself from future traumatic events, we talked about how boundaries are important. So basically, once you start doing things like boundaries, you realize it becomes easier for you to sort of move on and allow yourself to let go of things, allow yourself to not necessarily hold on to various things that have been happening. So moving forward, we talked a lot about boundaries, the different aspects of boundaries. For the purpose of my 7-day event, I decided to break boundaries down into 7 different categories. So each one reflected different things. Then I talked about how boundaries are important and why it's important. Also, one thing I told them, and I typically share with anyone that I talk about boundaries, is boundaries, it's a means for you to protect yourself, really. And at the end of the day, the goal of boundaries is for you to feel comfortable, for you to feel in control. You want to be able to feel like you could say yes without feeling like you have to be obligated to say yes to somebody when they ask you to do something or to be involved in something. You want to be able to say no and feel confident enough to say no, that you don't want to be part of something, or you don't want something to be necessarily influential or affecting you in any way. So saying yes or no is part of boundaries. Boundaries basically should be giving you control. It should make you feel empowered. So how do you go about figuring out what is the healthiest type of boundary? So I like using the analogy of thinking of, if you're building a house, what would it be like for your best protection? So basically, I like saying that there are different categories to boundaries. One of it would be thinking of building the house. Let's say we decide to build a house. We build a house with 4 walls and a sealed roof. There's nothing else besides 4 solid walls. So when you put 4 solid walls up, you basically block yourself in, right? With the seal wall, while yes, it protects you from the external world, if there's an event of any type of, say for example, a storm or any major threats on the outside, yes, the 4 walls and the solid sealed roof would definitely protect you, but then you don't have an avenue to let things out. So having a rigid sort of boundary, it's very unhealthy. Then the second type of boundary that you don't want to have is what would be sort of like a porous boundary. So it would be, if you're thinking of in terms of where your boundaries would be, I have 2 walls and a half a roof. Yes, it would protect you if you shift yourself into certain corners of the house, but then it doesn't completely protect you enough to say you have enough control of, if I need to move to a certain part of the house, then I don't have that protection because I don't have a wall there to protect me. I don't have a part of the roof necessarily to protect me there. So again, it's an unhealthy type of boundary when it comes to that. The third type of unhealthy boundary is what it's pretty much like a non-existent boundary. So you think of setting a boundary where it's you have the floor alone. You don't have any walls and you don't have any roof over your head. So again, you're completely exposed to the element. So that is what non-existent type boundary would be. The healthy type of boundary would be where you build your houses, you have the 4 walls, you have your roof, but within the walls, you have windows and doors. So the windows and doors is where it allows you to have control of what you let in and what you let out of those things, who you allowed into your personal space, who you allowed to leave your personal space or whatever it is. And again, when it comes to healthy boundaries, the big part is having a clear definition of what it is like to be on your side of it, and then a clear setting of what the other person's personal space would be. So there must be sort of like a clear line when it comes to boundaries. Also, a big part of boundaries that we talked about is that when you set your boundary, you should have consequences towards the boundaries for people who break the boundaries, because in that way, if you don't have consequences, then it makes it easy for people to sort of take advantage of the situation, sort of allow things to just go easily haywire. So it's important to have the consequences within the boundaries. Then sharing the consequences is even more important, because if you tell people like, oh, this is my boundary, but I don't have any consequences, again, you leave it open for people to take advantage of that situation. Once you define your consequences and you share your consequences, then it's time for you to respect your consequences and the consequences that you set. So if you have someone there who is testing the waters pretty much with the boundaries, then it's important that you enforce those consequences and be like, whatever the consequences may be, you put it to work pretty much to your protection. Because again, the idea of boundaries really is to protect yourself. So again, that was kind of like a quick overview of what the 7 days was like for the Forgive to Freedom Challenge. Varying people had sort of varying views on how the challenge was. I mean, most people did say they enjoy the challenge. Some people joined in every night on the live session. Some people weren't able to for varying reasons. So I'm still grateful for whoever were able to join in during those challenges. And some of the feedback that I got was that they enjoyed it. They took things, they felt that breaking things down made it easier for them to work through the specific challenge. One positive thing that came out of having the group discussions at the end of the day was that a lot of people were able to relate to each other. So regardless of what the type of trauma that they wanted to work on, or the aspect of forgiveness that they wanted to work on that during these 7 days, they found that when each person sort of shared aspects of their stories, that they could relate to it. So I was happy that we were able to sort of make that connection. So again, sometimes we never know who could benefit from hearing our stories and who could relate to our stories. A lot of people go through different types of traumatic events or stressful periods in their life, and they're afraid to sort of talk about it or bring it up. And what happens is they think that they're the only one that is pretty much experiencing it. They don't realize how much other people may be affected sort of by the same issue or the same type of event within their life. It may not be the same person, but definitely there are some overlaps in terms of what are the basis of the event. So again, I was very happy and pleased that people were willing and comfortable enough to share their views on on how or what exactly they were working on during the Forgive to Freedom Challenge. I do plan on doing another one just because of the feedback that I got, how much people enjoyed it. I do plan on doing another one either later in August or the beginning of September. That's my estimated time. So I'll definitely be sharing that information as that time come along so that people could have a little bit more idea of when the other event would be coming in. But again, forgiveness really is something tough to do. A lot of times we take forgiveness sort of as a minor thing, and we don't realize how much of an impact that it could play in our lives. When it comes to, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to being involved in something, be it a stressful event, be it a traumatic event, we make an energetic connection to that specific event, especially our younger self. So be it a childhood trauma or be it an adulthood trauma, we still hold on to some aspect of it. And the more we hold on to it and the longer away from it, it's sort of the deeper we suppress it, and we don't realize necessarily the effects of holding onto those things. Because every time that person comes up with that theme of whatever the event is comes up, and it creates sort of an emotional reaction to you, it's really because of the energy that you're holding on to from the original event. So forgiving the person, or forgiving yourself, as the case might be, or both, it's important because it allows you to let go of that energy. And like I shared during the challenge every night, that participating in a forgiveness exercise, it's not necessarily so much for the individual that you may be forgiven as it is for you to forgive yourself and for you to get that positive effect out of it to move on. I like to think of it, when you hold on to those things, hold on to trauma, hold on to the effects of it, it's pretty much carrying an invisible backpack, and you keep that weight on your shoulder every single day and you carry it around with you. Whenever something else happens, it sort of adds on to that extra weight, and it becomes like a magnet, more or less. It allows all the other negative energy to sort of build up and surround it. So you keep going through life with this extra weight and extra burden every single day. You go and you ask, you do different types of therapy, and you say like, all right, I dealt with the situation, but you haven't really dealt with the forgiveness aspect of it. You feel good about going in and talking about whatever, or doing different types of therapy that helps you sort of process the trauma. But when it comes to actually letting go of the effect, it's not until you're able to do forgiveness. And that's why, like, I felt forgiveness and doing this challenge was sort of an ideal thing to do. I know I've used this challenge with patients, not necessarily in this specific way. I've given them the entire steps all at once. And I thought that if I did it in 7 days, do it over an extended period, it makes it more of a manageable chunk to deal with. Again, like I said, forgiveness is a tough thing to do. It requires you to dig in. It requires you to connect to pieces of yourself that you've been trying to suppress. And sometimes it brings up very tough things that you really wanted to suppress and you wanted to get out of your system, but you, instead of getting it out, you just sort of covered it up, you buried it deep. And when the deeper you have to dig to pull something out, the stronger the effects becomes for you, because it's already so deeply suppressed that it makes it difficult, one, just to go in and get it. And then when it comes back up, it makes you feel like everything's fresh all over again. So again, when you do work on forgiveness, it sort of helps you to let go of it. It allows you to move on as an individual. And again, let go of those unnecessary and painful burden that we carry with us each and every day. So I'm just going to go through some of the days and some of the notes that I made in terms of where people gave a little bit of feedback. On day one, and every single day that we went through the challenge, we worked on defining forgiveness. So one of my goals was basically to see how does the definition of forgiveness change for people over the course of the 7 days as they understand different aspects of forgiveness and they work on the challenge itself. So day one, a lot of people's feedback really was that it's easy to begin. They felt like it's easy to pick the event that they wanted to work on, because that's basically what phase one was, figuring it out. So worked on picking the event and start building your affirmation. So basically finding out the who and the what of that event and saying, I forgive the who for whatever the event was. And then the second day, it became a tougher day because when we started working on releasing the effects, it required you to ask a little bit more detail, to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out when was this event there, and sort of connect to your younger self of when that event happened. So the main feedback that I got, that day two was sort of a tough day for people going through the challenge. It brought up memories that they tried to push away, they tried to suppress for a long time. Or some of them even mentioned that they felt like when it brought it up, they didn't feel like it was bothering them before, because again, it's a suppressed memory. It's a suppressed thing that you covered so deep that you have everything else going on. It's easy to focus on what's present at hand. And when it's buried deep, again, like I said, it creates that effect that it's more traumatic to sort of relive it because of how deep it was. And it's kind of like a spring effect. The stronger down you hold the tension on the spring, when it releases, it's going to create sort of a more powerful reaction. So that was day two. Day three was where we started focusing on energizing the space. So a lot of people felt good about adding that positive emotion. They felt like after doing the release that they start noticing more of a difference, which was helpful for them. And again, focusing on the positive energy more so than the negative energy, they felt like that was sort of a positive shift for them. Day four, when we talked about experiencing the new energy, a lot of people talked about the peace being something beneficial when they added that into their affirmation and talked about including and energizing the space with peace. They felt like that was helpful. Incorporating breath work while we energize the space and experience the new energy. People felt like that was helpful as well in terms of incorporating breathing. And again, breathing is something, it seems sort of cliche, but a lot of times what happens is it's a second nature thing for us to breathe. And I know when I was in the military, sometimes we would joke around that it's easy for people to say just breathe, but it's actually the hardest thing for people to focus on in terms of doing. So again, when it comes to breathing, it creates a more powerful reaction, because when you focus on breathing, when you focus on controlling breathing, it creates such a significant difference. And there are different types of breathing exercises, but basically for this event, the 7 day challenge, I basically talked about when you're doing the breathing exercises, you basically think and you picture yourself sort of breathing in and breathing in positive energy. And when you breathe out, you sort of let go of the negative energies associated with the traumatic event that happened. So a lot of people felt that on day four with the breath work, that it was a lot more helpful incorporating those things. Day four, because it was the middle of the challenge, we sort of did a reflection in terms of how everyone's goals were and do they feel like they're on track dealing with everything that has been happening, or the goals that they set out on day one. So a lot of people were saying that they were on track. Some people felt like each day thus far has been manageable, again, with the exception of the second day. But once we got to the third day, it became easier for them to deal with it. Day five, again, became sort of a tough day for some individuals. They felt like demonstrating forgiveness was tough, bringing forgiveness to your current day life, because a lot of times we go through those cliche approaches to asking for forgiveness, or even just saying sorry and just move on, not taking time to actually focus and think about how forgiveness really works. So it was helpful for a lot of people on that day to do role reversals. to be able to demonstrate forgiveness. Even though it was tough, they definitely felt it being beneficial in terms of being able to reflect. So they were happy that they had that opportunity to sort of deal with that. But again, it was a tough day for some people working through the challenge. Day 6, again, we did a little bit of reflection. We took the time to observe the effects of everything that was going on in terms of the challenge. So again, some of the feedback was that the breathing exercises made it easy for people. One person even shared that practicing the breathing exercises allowed them to be able to utilize it in a quick seconds, where they felt like they could use the breathing exercise not just as part of the forgiveness exercise, but be able to incorporate it in a different aspect where it's a stressful event and quickly taking the breaths in and breaths out, saying I'm taking in the positive energy, releasing the negative energy, and just using that part of the forgiveness affirmation. They felt like it's a quick thing that you could use in an instant. Some people mentioned that the role reversal was tough because it sort of led to overthinking. Again, different people have different styles. When we do reflection, some people sort of get stuck into thinking about the situation. And something that I mentioned in terms of like when you're doing reflection, the idea of the role reversals and doing the reflection is that you get a chance to go back and think of what has happened. And whenever we do any type of reflection, depending on the individual, sometimes it's easy for them to get stuck. So the goal really when it comes to doing reflection is that you get in and you get out as quickly as you could. You don't want to get stuck there in that phase of reflection. So even though the role reversal was tough, once I explained that aspect of it, it became easier for that individual to understand that it's important to sort of create that boundary for yourself so that when you do have that opportunity to work on self-reflection, you don't get stuck being there. And then day 7, again, is the moving forward day. The idea again of the challenge is that these 7 phases gives you a step that you can apply in your everyday life, not just to that one specific event that may have happened that you wanted to work on. So some people chose tough issues that they've been dealing with that they wanted to work on forgiveness. Some people chose things that they felt would have been more manageable for it. So again, once the 7 days are completed, you have a framework of how you are now able to sort of move forward. So it was good that people shared that they felt comfortable enough that they feel like after the 7 days, they have a framework of how they could do the same style of forgiveness. Even though I shared an affirmation of how to do the challenge, I basically had people sort of try to keep it as personalized as possible. And in that way, the more personalized you have it as an individual, it makes it easier for you to go through the process and make it yours rather than mine. Some people need the structure where they feel like when you're working on something, if you don't have that structure, it's easy to fall apart or drift apart. So some people appreciated the structure in terms of that. But again, the idea was to make people have the opportunity to be as personal as possible and allow themselves to get out whatever they're holding on to. Again, we talked about boundaries. The boundaries topic came up from day 1, but I sort of held it back to day 7, where when we discussed the boundaries, it's something more for you to move on rather than making it overwhelming, including boundaries from day 1, even though I'm pretty sure it would have been helpful to talk about it from day 1. Another thing we did on day 1 and day 7 was something called a directional assignment. And basically it's thinking of forgiveness and using the different directions, east, west, north, and south, as a means to figuring out what you could do to help you achieve forgiveness, or how could you feel that specific aspect of it. So I shared with the group what I did in terms of like, if I think of forgiveness as being the central theme, and then think of each direction and what type of things would help me feel forgiveness is present. So that exercise was something that we did there as well, and then showed how you could utilize it for other things within your life. So again, forgiveness, the Freedom Challenge, or Forgive the Freedom Challenge, was basically 7 days of working on different aspects of forgiveness, understanding different aspects of forgiveness, and allowing yourself to move on. And again, the big part of forgiveness is not so much for the person being forgiven as much as is it for yourself. And then incorporating self-forgiveness is important within the challenge itself, and forgiving your younger self for holding on to the effects. One thing that came up during the challenge was some people mentioned that they want to forgive and they don't want to forget. And it's understandable and justifiable with that. And we talked about how the goal of forgiveness is not necessarily to forget what had happened. The idea is what you want to forget or what you want to release is the negative energies of whatever that event was. But in terms of holding on to something, what you want to hold on to is the positive outcomes that came from it. So a lot of times when we go through different phases in our life or different traumatic events, there might be some type of positive lesson that would come out of it. So the lesson that you learn is what you want to hold on to rather than holding on to the specific event. So that was one of the lessons I wanted to share, that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting, but the idea is to get to, when you forgive, you want to release the negative energy. You want to hold on to that positive energy in terms of the positive things that came out would be whatever life lesson that you learn from it. So for some people, it may have been like an abusive relationship. Again, the positives that may come out of that is learning the lesson of there might be some type of red flags that you would have identified within those situations. I talked about the cycle of abuse and identifying different red flags within the individual. I talked about how you go through different phases when it comes to the cycle of abuse, where there's always that reconciliation phase between sort of like chronic abusers, and understanding where that creates in itself an issue for individuals. So a lot of times people who get out of an abusive relationship, they feel like they hold themselves accountable for getting into it when it's not necessarily them. It's because they get caught into the cycle without actually realizing that is what is happening. So once you're able to identify the cycle, it makes it easier for you to break the cycle. It makes it easier for you to get out, because then you understand that, all right, yes, this person came and tried to reconcile, but it was just a temporary reconciliation. You have that calm period, but then you go back into that phase where you're walking on eggshells again. And then you have the phase where the abusive event happened again. And then you create a cycle where you go back and then reconciliation, and you get that calm, nice honeymoon phase again. And then you go back again through that entire cycle. So understanding the cycle was something that we sort of covered within the challenge as well, just because that was one of the topics that came up for some of the individuals. Also understanding that we can't always change people for whatever reasons. When we work on forgiveness, again, the forgiveness is not necessarily to change the individual. It's for you to sort of let go of whatever it is and to allow you to sort of move on. So when you work on forgiveness, it's not so much about trying to change a person, because they may be stuck in their ways. They may have been through certain life events that allow them to think a certain way or do or react a certain way to you. And you trying to change people sometimes in a drastic way is not always the best way, because sometimes the harder you push, the stronger the resistance and the harder they push back. So we talked about trying to change people when you're doing these types of forgiveness exercise, or when it's difficult to forgive an individual because they constantly in your life. It's challenging because of that reason, because they're constantly there and they're not changing their ways. So we talked about how boundaries could be effective in helping you deal with that aspect of it. And then we talked about, instead of trying to make drastic changes for people, working more on a subtle level might be more beneficial to individuals there. So again, the 7 days challenge was all about working on forgiveness. The reason behind doing the 7 days challenge was, recently I got my book published, Trauma to PTSD. And one aspect of the book, I went into talking about forgiveness and using forgiveness affirmations to allow you to move on from trauma. And again, a big part, like I mentioned earlier, is we experience a trauma, we hold on to regrets, be it regret of the other person involved in the event, or even ourselves, like we hold on to self-guilt and self-blame. And not until we start working on forgiveness and releasing those negative effects are we truly able to move on from those traumatic events. So that's where the idea of creating the 7-day challenge and utilizing it to help more people move on from trauma and PTSD and different types of mental health conditions where they've been exposed to different types of trauma and different types of stressful events. So being able to move on sometimes require forgiveness, and creating a space and creating a sort of skeleton framework where people could utilize to move on, it's important. So that's where the 7 days event challenge. So on the topic of the book was recently published as an ebook on Amazon, and then now it's available for the print copy of the book. So if anyone's interested in getting the book, basically it goes into different types of traumas. It talks about the risk factors of traumas, things like transgenerational trauma, abuse cycles, things like adaptive survivor styles. We talked about different types of ways of identifying the types of traumas that you've been exposed to, things like social injustice, racism, inequality, how those things play an aspect in trauma in your life. Talked about risk factors and what are some risk factors, not just trauma, but things like nutrition, things like genetics, different type of anatomical and physiological changes, how those things could play a part in affecting or increasing the risk of one developing PTSD. So those are some of the things that we talked about in the book. It's sort of built from understanding trauma, understanding risk factors, understanding causes, and then sort of built on different techniques that once you could identify the cause, then you have an opportunity to know what to work on. And a big part of naturopathic medicine and acupuncture, and I guess medicine as a whole, is trying to understand what is the root cause. And if you treat the root cause, it's easier for you to really deal with whatever is the issue at hand. So again, the goal of the book is identifying those root causes of PTSD. And then we went into a little bit more of different types of ways to deal with it. So we talked more about boundaries. We talked about understanding your relationship to PTSD. We talked about different types of therapies that could be beneficial for individuals who are affected by trauma. Understanding that not because you're not clinically diagnosed with PTSD, it may not necessarily mean that you're not affected by PTSD and the effects of trauma. So once you're affected, once you encounter a traumatic event, there is a chance of you being affected by it. And a lot of it deals with like your resiliency in terms of doing that to be able to overcome whatever traumatic event that you've experienced. So a part of the book, we also talked about resiliency, stress first aid, and allowing you to move forward or move on from the trauma. There's also worksheets on different aspects of how to help you move forward again. So at the end of the day, the goal is always, one, figuring out what is the root cause, two, addressing the root cause, creating a treatment pattern, and then how do you move forward from there. So the goal of the book really was to bring all of those things all together and share it with individuals. My book actually started since I was working on my thesis at University of Bridgeport for my doctorate in naturopathic medicine. that's what I did my thesis on, post-traumatic stress disorder, and understanding and treating PTSD utilizing the 6 principles of naturopathic medicine. So that's where it started. And doing more and more research on it, you understand that there are tons of different scientifically proven methods that help people deal with trauma, deal with PTSD, deal with different types of mental health conditions in general. So bringing all of those things together in one place was one of the goals of the book, and sharing it within the book is important. So again, the name of the book was is Trauma to PTSD, Root Causes to Healing Branches. The website to get the book is www.trauma2ptsd.com. The ebook is available on Amazon, and the print book is available at that said website, www.trauma2ptsd.com. Once you go on that link, it does have a link to get to where the ebook is, and you could purchase the book. The book officially was available for purchase as of yesterday, so the 15th of July was the official sort of release date for sales. Prior to that, it was pre-sales, and then on the 24th of June was when I did sort of the official ebook release. So again, the Forgiveness to Freedom Challenge was something that stemmed from the book. I know my goal today was to bring awareness to the Forgive to Freedom Challenge, and understanding that it's important to work on forgiveness, to sort of forgive people, forgive yourself, and allow yourself to move on, not carry on a burden that you could necessarily pass on from generation to generation. So again, forgiveness is important, not just for the person that you want to forgive, but more so for yourself, and allowing you that opportunity to move on. So again, thanks to each and everyone who joined in on the live today. I hope this little message was helpful to any individual who joined in. Again, like I said, the Forgive to Freedom Challenge, it's a 7-day event. It was previously held from the 7th of July to the 15th of July. Another one will be coming in the near future, probably around the ending of August, beginning of September, around there. I'll be doing another 7-day challenge. So anyone interested, just keep a lookout for that on my social media pages. And then again, just a quick highlight of the book itself, the book that I wrote, Trauma to PTSD, Root Causes to Healing Branches. The goal again of the book really was to bring awareness to different types of root causes associated with PTSD, different types of risk factors associated with it. And then once you understand those root causes, knowledge becomes power, where you allow yourself to know what you have to work on, dealing with that specific thing. Bringing awareness to the idea that there are different types of healing approaches or self-care approaches, or even professionally run programs that are helpful for individuals with PTSD, trauma, and any type of mental health, to be able to get out and help yourself. There are a lot of options there, and not because you tried one and it didn't work means that you have to give up hope. So there is hope, there is different approaches and different things that you could do and allow yourself to be able to move on from the effects of trauma. So forgiveness was one of them. Again, and then there are different types of things that you could utilize and do that could be beneficial for moving on. Again, survival is our adaptive mechanism. We are designed as humans to survive, but when it comes to thriving, it's a choice. So in order to thrive, we have to make necessarily changes. We have to make necessarily shifts within our lives and do things that would make that difference for us. So again, understanding the difference between survival and thriving, it's important. Being able to thrive is what you really want to accomplish. So again, thanks to each and everyone who joined in today. And I do hope that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media, DM me or comment on this post and let me know if you have any specific questions about forgiveness or dealing with it, or even you have any questions about my book itself. feel free to message me and let me know. So again, thanks to each and everyone who joined in today on this live. And I hope that it was a little bit helpful in terms of bringing a little bit more awareness to the challenge, understanding the different phases associated with the challenge. So again, thank you for joining me.